Would you rather sing about freedom or live it?
She names the sky her own.
Good morning and welcome to Lost for Words, where we are exploring great women poets. I am Sarah Woods, and today, continuing with Miss Maya Angelou in her book of complete poetry. Today, we are going to be exploring her poem called The Caged Bird. And I feel like this is a classic Maya Angelou poem. Like when you think of her, this is one of those poems that comes into your mind. Today we're going to jump straight into this poem, explore the worlds of two different birds. So let's go. A free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends, and dips his wing in the orange sun rays and dares to claim the sky. But a bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. The free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade winds soft through the sighing trees, and the fat worms waiting on a dawn-bright lawn, and he names the sky his own. But a caged bird stands on the grave of dreams. His shadow shouts on a nightmare scream. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. So here we have Maya Angelou. She has painted a picture of two separate birds, and she has taken the worlds of these birds and she has pushed them really close together in a way that she puts them both right in front of our vision and makes us have to confront our ideas about freedom, oppression, movement, singing. Yeah, she's making us reconcile our ideas about freedom and oppression by pushing these birds so close together in this poem. So I think what we're going to do with this poem is we'll take maybe one bird at a time, and we'll start to piece together what life is like for this bird. She starts off her poem. Her poem is titled Caged Bird. So the first thing you think of when you start your poem is you're thinking of a caged bird. So you're imagining like a little bird cage, a bird. It's confined in this cage. But then she starts the poem and she begins describing the free bird. So she immediately switches you to a different state as soon as you start the poem. And she says, a free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends, and dips his wing in the orange sun rays and dares to claim the sky. So here you have a free bird, and in this picture she's painting for us for the free bird, you immediately imagine this bird that has almost like unlimited space. Its wings can fully extend. Oh yeah, like these are my wings. These wings can fully extend. And you imagine this big open sky, and you imagine the horizon, and like when you gaze up at the sky, you imagine this space where just this like feeling of unlimited possibility, freedom of movement. You imagine the color. She starts describing this bird, like, so you're imagining it flying. It leaps onto the back of the wind. So this is a bird that is getting to experience the sky, the wind, the sun. Like, all of his senses are getting to experience the pleasure of nature. And I love imagining this bird leaping onto the back of the wind and floating all the way until the current ends. So you just imagine this long stretch of space that this bird is getting to move. And then it says he dips his wing in the orange sun rays. Like, can't you just imagine like flying through the sky and there being like this really beautiful sunrise or sunset, and extending your wing and like letting your wing like sort of like fly over the edge of the sun, like almost like you're getting to dip your wing into the sun's rays. Like, I feel like she's done a really good job of like painting this beautiful picture of movement and color and freedom. And then she says, and he dares to claim the sky. So this free bird is like playing in this space of endless possibility, experiencing the touch of the wind, playing with his wings and the color of the sun. And because he is free, when he looks at the sky, he thinks, oh, this is mine. Like, this is my playground. This is my space. And so it has sort of this feeling of like, to me, it has like a euphoric sort of feeling about it. So she's given us this free bird, and it's like just this amazing experience in the sky. So then she switches, and the next stanza, she takes us back to the cage bird. So you're leaving this euphoric state and you're jumping into a cage with a contained bird. And she says, but a bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped, his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. So now you have this picture of a bird cage, and you have this small area. So we go from this wide, expansive, limitless space of the sky to a cage. And we go from jumping on the back of the wind, dipping your wings into the sun and claiming the whole sky. We go from that to this little bird in a cage, and it used the word stalks. But the bird stalks down his narrow cage. So then you get this picture of, or I do, of like this little round bird cage. And then I actually had birds growing up. I had two little parakeets, or me and my brother had two parakeets when we were little. Mine was blue and his was green. And oh my gosh, I love these little birds. But as much as I loved having a bird, like when you think about the reality of a bird being in a cage, it's like it's terrible to imagine that limited space being all that there is for you. So you imagine this bird. I can remember the birds like at night, like when I would go to sleep, you could hear them like running back and forth in the cage sometimes if they weren't tired. So I can imagine, like I feel like it's very easy for me to imagine this bird stalking down his narrow cage, like just running back and forth on on his feet, like a bird. You know, he's not using his wings. He is running back and forth in his cage on his little feet. So there's in contrast to the free bird, there is no use of his wings. And there's very limited movement. He's got this tiny little floor that he stalks back and forth. Like in order to move, he has to walk back and forth across the same space over and over and over again. Whereas the free bird had like limitless space to explore and extend himself. And then it says, he can seldom see through his bars of rage. So now, so the free bird is getting to see like the sky, the sunsets, and this cage bird, it says he can seldom see through his bars of rage. So you have this feeling of this bird barely being able to see, and then the feeling that you actually feel, that this bird is feeling, is rage, is anger. It's like a fury at his containment. That is this bird's existence, is like you can imagine his feeling of rage filling up that whole space. We have this other bird that is like feeling a sense of like ownership of the world, ownership of the sky, like he belongs here. Then we have this other bird that is stalking down his cage back and forth, and this feeling of like rage, like filling up that space and like being the very bars that are containing him. Then it says, his wings are clipped and his feet are tied. To me, that part is extra sad, because not only is this bird in a cage, like it almost feels like it doesn't even matter if this bird were free, because his wings are clipped and his feet are tied. Like you could open the door to that cage, but like even if you gave that bird freedom, because his wings are clipped, there is no sky for this bird. And it's like just extra torture on top of torture. It's like, here's a bird in a cage, and we're also going to tie his feet, and we're going to clip his wings. So it's like on all sides, this bird is, it feels like he's ruined, and he can't be what he was meant to be. And then it says, so he opens his throat to sing. It's funny, when I've always thought of a cage bird singing, in my mind it was like a beautiful thing. But after reading her poem, it made me realize that it's actually a very sad thing, because this bird is singing because that is all he has. So if you think about freedom, like where this other bird, this free bird, his whole body, his whole spirit gets to experience movement and going where he pleases, and the joy of belonging and feeling like the world is his. But this other bird in his cage does not feel that. It experiences like a feeling of rage. And so it says he opens his throat to sing. So I feel like whenever I read that line, I can imagine that this bird's voice feels like is the closest things to wings it feels like this bird has. And so I can imagine like this song like coming up out of this bird, that his body cannot move outside this cage, but his voice travels beyond those bars. And Like that is this bird's like little bit of, that's this bird's taste of freedom is in his song. It says, the caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still. And his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. So to me, it's a sad reality for this bird. Like, to be a bird is to be made for movement and for flight, is to be made for the sky. And all that has been stripped from this bird. And even in this, the last thing this bird has, it doesn't get to experience freedom, but it gets to long for it and express that longing in song. So I feel like the contrast is a free bird lives his freedom and moves. He has movement. The caged bird has no movement, and so he has to sing his freedom. So then we're going to jump. So we had one stanza about the free bird, two about the caged bird. Now we're going to jump back to the free bird. I love this little stanza. The free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade wind soft through the sighing trees, and the fat worms waiting on the dawn bright lawn, and he names the sky his own. I love imagining this bird this bird so pleasured by the wind that it's just excited for the next wind. Like, okay, what's next? What's the next experience? And then this bird waiting for the morning so that he can go out and eat up these fat little worms. He can also feed himself. I don't think I thought about that before. The free bird gets to wake up in the morning and go out into on the ground in the earth and find his breakfast, find his fat worm. The caged bird, if you think of it, of the opposite of that, a caged bird has no power to feed himself. The caged bird is completely dependent on something outside of him bringing food to his cage so that he can eat. So if that thing doesn't come to his cage and feed him, he is not eating. So there's like that feeling of independence versus dependence. Oh, I love this line. So then we go back to the caged bird, and it says, but a caged bird stands on the grave of dreams. His shadow shouts on a nightmare scream. I really, really love this line because, I don't know, I feel like there's something very human in us that likes to like dream of a brighter future and see what we can do to make those things happen. But a caged bird, having a dream, like every dream becomes a dead thing. Like it can never happen. So every dream every dream dies. And so then you get this picture of this bird cage not only being this small confined space that the bird, stalks down back and forth over and over again, and it's filled up with rage. It also is a graveyard. Like he is living in his own graveyard of dreams. There is no possibility for his dreams for him to take ownership of his dreams and make them happen. His shadow shouts on a nightmare scream that the thing that is fulfilled for this bird is like a nightmare. And then it says his wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with the fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. So for Maya Angelou, I have a feeling this poem, I'm realizing she has quite a bit of poetry that I've barely touched the surface of, that is about her experience of being a Black woman, born into a culture where African Americans have had to fight their way to freedom. And that when she was born, I think she was born in 1928, so she grew up in the 1930s. And so she got to experience a world where people with her color skin were very devalued and did not have freedom of movement, that they were, did not get to walk about the world freely. Like, they didn't get to go into the same stores as white people. Like, they couldn't sit where they wanted to on a bus or in a restaurant or use the same water fountains. Like, we all know those, stories about our American history. But she was born into that world. Black people did not have the freedom of movement, the freedom to take life into their own hands and move about the world freely, and feel like they belonged there and like the world was theirs too, while at the same time watching white people do this, like watching white people move about the world like the world was theirs and that they belonged there and that they could go wherever they want and the sky was limitless. That it's very possible that this is her vision of in contrast of these two peoples, like, inside of America. It's highly, I feel like lots of things that I've read point towards this poem having that meaning, that possible meaning for her. But it also does have, the way she's written this poem, it does have a feeling that you could, like, any person who's experienced oppression or freedom could read into this poem their experience. So this poem makes me think, like, people are not birds, obviously. We are human beings. But I still feel like even as human beings, we have the same desires in us to be able to walk and move about the world freely, to be able to say how we really feel about something, to express ourselves honestly, that we have the desire to be able to think about ideas and figure things out. I feel like we have the desire not to be confined or oppressed or told that we can't feel things or think things. Like, I feel like human beings, like, that freedom is like a huge part of our being. So this makes me wonder, like, as a human being, what are some of the things that make a human being feel caged? Let's stop. Anyways, thank you guys for joining me today to explore these two birds. I hope you all have a great week.